Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Everyday Heroes series. Today on our podcast, we have Ariella Lew, and she is extremely qualified. Okay, she's a paediatric nurse. She deals with clients locally and internationally. She is kick ass. But let me tell you, her passion, where she is going the best, where she's the biggest bangusters, is advocating for our neurodivergent children in schools. And I say that in mainstream schools. Now, the conversation that we're going to have today with Ariella is going to be based more around advocating for our neurodivergent learners in mainstream schools. I'm going to get Ariella to come back on at another time to talk more around neurodivergent and special needs schools. But for this conversation, primarily, we're really going to talk about mainstream because I think that might be better off. But as I've mentioned to Ariella offline, if she wants to add in information about special needs schools, please feel free to do so. So please welcome Ariella. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's been a while in the making, so I'm so happy to finally be here.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get into this. What are the first steps a parent should take if they feel like their child's needs aren't being met? What do they do? How do they go about getting their child's needs met in an education setting?
So I think let's take a step back from that first, because I think the first thing we have to think about, and one of the first things that I hear from schools, is the expectations aren't realistic. So I think before we get into that, I think parents need to, when they're saying their child's needs aren't being met, they need to really dig down into what isn't being met, and is what isn't being met something that school is even able to do. So if what isn't being met is they don't have 25 friends that can come to their birthday party, right? Well, actually, if your child is neurodivergent and struggles on the social scene, and then in a mainstream school that doesn't have a social integration program or something like that, chances are it's a need the school can't meet. So just want to, I think first it's about nutting down what's not being met. That's number one. Then the first thing, or rather the thing not to do, is do not enter into a backwards and forwards in emails and phone calls and all this. That is going to literally have everyone running around in circles. And generally by the end of that, the good relationships that you do have, be that with the principal, the class teacher, the secretary, whoever it is, it's all gone to hell. So the best thing to do is, as soon as you have a concern, is to actually use the contact, be that probably not the class teacher, actually, probably the head of special ed, student services, whatever they're calling it, and actually go and say, look, I'd really like to have a meeting. I'd like to be proactive to get into what I feel is going on. So that's sort of, and the sooner you can find that meeting, the better. Who they choose to come to it, that's up to them, but get them face to face. It's going to be much easier. And also, I feel like as parents, there's often a lot of emotion behind this. Sometimes for a school to actually see that emotion is not a bad thing. Let them see like the heartbreak that you're having. Let them see that your child is coming home, sticks their headphones on, and won't talk to you all night because whatever's gone on they can't cope with. Let them hear it, really hear it properly, raw. And I think certainly for primary school, for high school, before you even go into high school, I'm going to be really frank, most high schools, for neurodivergent learners, you're going to be having to advocate from day dot. That is not what they are set up to do. Some are better than others, but it's never going to be an easy ride. It's going to be bumpy. They'll find their people, but it's going to be bumpy. So I would, from day dot, make sure you know who is your point person. Is it the head of student services? Is it the school counselor? Could be a million people. Different schools have different structures. But from day dot going in, you want to know who that person is. And these meetings, I would say, should be happening outside of the legal SSG or PSG, depending what they call them, that they have to have. But outside of that, things do happen. We can't just say, okay, we're going to meet once a term, and if my child falls apart in the interim, oops. Things don't always neatly fit into a 50-minute PSG.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's what I would say.
I love it. We've just gone past the 5-minute mark, and I feel like we could have already written a whole book about just on this one question. So I hope that our listeners have got notepads and pens, because you have so much to offer, because it is so important. It is. And it's so important that we do share that emotion. Like, I see so many reels on socials where mum's like, I held it together for the meeting, and then I got in my car and I literally just sobbed into my steering wheel, right? I don't think it's bad to, like you said, show that how heavy this is to carry. And
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder if the principals and the teaching staff realize how heavy it is, because it's one thing to like teach a neurodivergent, but it's another completely different situation raising a neurodivergent child, right? And so sharing that with them could very much hopefully click on their empathy button and just be like, okay, we need to do something more about it. Okay, I love that. In terms of how to, we've all been there, right? We've all seen the parents like labeled like the difficult parent. Oh, she's always on the phone. She's always emailing. She's a pain in the beep. You know, like we hear all this stuff all the time. And so how do we advocate for our neurodivergent children without being that person, that mum, that dad, that person who's going to be like the pain in the bum? We don't want to be that person, but we want to be doing right by our child. How do we do that?
Okay, so I'd say a couple of things. First of all, I have to say I did laugh when I read that question that you sent me in advance. So first of all, if you, depending on the school and depending on the relationships you have and whatever, if you're finding that actually it's been very good, but suddenly it's always been good along the way, suddenly you've hit a bit of a wall with a particular issue, which actually is often what happens. It's kind of like they're doing the best they can. I think most parents, certainly that I deal with, whose kids are neurodivergent, do know that nowhere's going to be perfect. And so they're happy to accept the not perfect, but then suddenly something pops up that is so far from perfect, it can't get around that. So one thing I would say is, if you feel that your relationships are really very, very good and you don't want to compromise those relationships, but actually someone needs to get serious and someone needs to get tough, I'm not the only person in the world that works in school advocacy. There are many, many organizations who have consultants who can actually have some of those difficult conversations with you, right? So it's not that they're coming in and they're going to be with you for your whole child's schooling. That's not necessarily what you need. But to navigate this particular issue, be it bullying, be it, kids are just going on screens, be it a break, a recess, lunchtime, whatever it might be it the workload's too up, whatever it is, actually at times for some families, that's where you should think about, for you to preserve your relationship and to not have to be the bitch, and for you not have to be it, let someone else do that. Bring someone you can do that. And that's within your rights. No school can stop you doing that. But I also would say, on the flip side of that, and again, personalities, I think schools are very quick to label parents difficult. But you know what? When you are an advocate, being difficult is not a terrible label. There's a great quote. I don't know if any of your followers have ever seen The West Wing, but there's a great quote in The West Wing where Matt Santos, who is the first Latino candidate for president, as the story goes, and they keep labeling him liberal. And at one point, someone throws the word liberal at him, and he said, "You keep throwing that at me, and I'm picking it up, and I'm wearing it as a badge of honor." And I think it's a very relevant thing. You're difficult. Good. You know why you're difficult? Because you are fighting to make sure that your child can be the best that they can be. So you know what? You're a difficult parent in school, but you're the most incredible parent on the planet. And those coexist.
Okay, so I'm going to just call you when I'm feeling down, and you can just tell me this stuff over.
Yes.
Like, I'll just have a recording.
Yes.
I'll just tell.
Yes. Like, as in, not when you advocate for anything, right? And obviously, I do advocacy in the school space, I do it in the mental health space, I do it in the medical space, I do it in a few different NDIS space. When you advocate, you are putting someone else's needs in front of your own. And as such, all that matters is what they need. What anyone thinks of you is actually irrelevant. It's actually, so yes, if they're labeling you to difficult to the point that you think it's going to compromise your relationship to the point you can't work together, that's a different story. But most of the time, it's not that. It's just that parents are feeling ashamed, or they're feeling like, oh, I don't know what if I'm not allowed to say that. You are allowed. They are your child. And ultimately, you know them better. I don't care about all this. In this context, at least, they spend 8 hours a day in a classroom, and so the the teachers see them through a prism. You see their whole lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think women in particular are so busy being people pleasers that we don't want to push the envelope for fear that we're going to be disliked, that we're not going to be, whatever, going to be seen in a negative light. And then it ends up being, well, we don't have mums who come in on a white horse, with their sword ready to advocate for their child because they're too scared to say anything because they're going to rock the boat. And that's not going to work out, because we need to have our children have those advocates. But I really love that idea of having a third party come in and being the bad guy, if you like, not that that's a bad guy, but like seen as that person who, well, it's not me saying it, it's that person. So if you want to direct all of that information back to them, that's great. And because that person isn't raising your neurodivergent child, they're not as emotional as you are as the mum raising your autistic child. So then, they can just present the facts. This is what it is. This is what this child needs. And this is how we're going to move forward. And I think that is sometimes so helpful for parents who feel like they don't have the experience or the capability to be able to come into some of these meetings, especially when you're walking in. Ariella, sometimes I have definitely walked into some schools where you sit down, you've got your notepad, your pen, you're ready to go into this meeting, and then 4 or 5 teachers walk in. Right? And I was like, what is going on? I feel like it was like the mafia. And I don't know if that's like an intimidation act or if that is just because that's how many people they actually need in this meeting. But it can be very scary if you're on that side of the fence and you're trying to advocate for a child and you're into like a board of people. So
and I think the other role of a good advocate is, yes, all of that on the school side, and it's my least favorite part of my job, but it does have to be done. But it's also saying to a parent, I know you want A, B, C, D, and E. You can forget C and D. If you want to stay in this school, C and D ain't happening. I'm not asking for it for you because you are not being reasonable. So it's also someone that can actually reframe A, B, E 100%. We need to fight for that, and that is. But it's also about saying, but you can't expect that. They didn't promise that. You can't expect.
I think it's also different when it's coming from a person who's advocating for you versus when it's coming from the school. Because when it's coming from the school, it feels like they just don't want to. Even if what you're saying is true and correct, sometimes when it's coming from the school, you feel like they're trying to not meet those needs. But in actual fact, maybe they can't meet those needs. And we do need to be more realistic in terms of trying to offer what we can within the scope of the school, right? Ideally, it'd be amazing if we had resident speeches and OTs and having all the support that is possible. But I don't necessarily know that is something that every school could offer. Maybe some schools do, but it's not always the case. Now, we were talking offline around the legal rights, around having a setting where you feel like the adjustments and the inclusions aren't working, then the reasonable adjustments aren't meeting the needs, right? And what are your legal rights? And we were saying offline that it's different in a mainstream setting versus a special needs school setting. So if you can just cover both of those, and then we can go from there.
I actually, before I answer it, if it's okay, sorry, I keep segueing the questions, but want to take a step back to say, to what we were saying before, when you were sort of saying, you know, sometimes it feels like the school is saying they don't want to. Legally, a school, well, they can. Legally, it is a very complex process for a school to say, we cannot cater for your child and we are the wrong school. Right? It's quite a complex thing for a school to do legally. They've got to prove and they've got to provide documentation. So schools will avoid saying that. But there is a huge line between them not saying that and yet they've done everything they can reasonably do. Those two things are not always in the same place. Right? So in terms of what are a child's legal rights, let's talk mainstream first. Mainstream can only provide what they can provide based on the funding that they have and the facilities that are available in the school. The funding for additional personnel and aides and sensory rooms and all the extra things is not great. And they are not going to spend additional money. What most schools do not have the resources to spend huge additional money and resource on kids who don't have, and many neurodivergent children do not have huge numbers of hours of aid support. So this then becomes this tug of war, because on the one hand, very often what children are needing, they're needing brain breaks, they're needing time in the sensory room, they might be needing additional time for work, they might be needing extension or, you know, differentiated curriculum, stuff like that. A mainstream public school can only do as much as they are funded to have and the staff that they have. So if we really like nut it down to the bottom, a school's legal responsibility is to provide a well-rounded education for a child. So that means things like differentiated curriculums. If there is a child who is gifted, if there is a child who has learning disabilities as part of their neurodivergence, whatever it is, they have to differentiate. They have to do that, and they have to have the staff do that. And I would be saying that when you're going and looking at the schools in your zone, if you know that about your child, you need to be asking those questions. I know that my child will need differentiation. Do you do it, and how? Because some schools do, some schools don't, right? So that is a legal right. But a legal right to make sure your child is socially included, as much as there is a social and emotional curriculum, as you say, they don't have resident speakers, they don't have resident OTs. Some of them have psychologists, some of them don't, with all the education department cuts. So that becomes very complicated. So what are reasonable adjustments? A reasonable adjustment is ensuring that your child, that they are doing everything they can to ensure your child is getting an education and they are able to access the classroom for the time that they can. In special ed schools, it is a little bit different, because special ed schools are much more particular from the beginning at what their criteria are. So they have, most of them, and again, hopefully this will cater to the people that are listening, there are medical criteria, there are IQ criteria, there are behaviour criteria. They look that way. If they are turning around to you and saying, in our school, we can cater for your child, but we need reduced hours, you have very little wiggle room as a parent. Because what they are saying is, we may not be the right school. They're literally saying that to you. Because, you know, and I've worked on cases like this, where they've been in a school that was certainly the right school at the beginning, but now maybe isn't. They're saying, look, we're not a specialist behaviour school. So therefore, now that we're seeing these behaviours, you may want to consider X, Y, Z. So in a special ed school, based on the school that you've chosen, and they literally are much better at doing what it says on the tin. So if you look at their admission criteria from the first place, who they accept and who they don't, they are much better at fitting in that box. So if your child is in a special ed school and you feel that special ed school is not catering for their needs, that then is probably, they will be ticking the legal boxes. They likely are, but much more than likely, what they're just not doing is saying, we can't look up. They're saying it in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, a great example of that is when my son came out of kindergarten, I'm sure I was in denial. And I was like, oh, no, he's going to go to mainstream. Like, absolutely he's going to not completely non-speaking, but we're going to go to mainstream. Like, we're good to go. And I remember going into this mainstream school, a Catholic school, and the principal came in and he was like, we are not the right school for this child. Like, we do not have the resources. And I remember, Ariella, how angry I was with this guy. I was like, I'm going to punch him in the face. And I was so full of rage, right? Because I was like, how dare he do this and blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't until many years down the track where I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Now the pennies dropped. Like, he wouldn't have coped in that school. And it would have been such a waste of time and not a good foundation for my son, because they just weren't set up, exactly like what you were just saying. They were not set up for where he was in his development at this time. And so Jamie Kern-Lima has a really good quote where she says, rejection is God's way of redirecting, right? There's a rejection is redirection. So don't take it as a rejection, rather take it as a redirection. Like, that's not where you should be. Like, if we're going to reframe it, that's not the school, that's not the right speechy, the right OT, the whatever it is that you're being rejected from, let's move it over here. Let's go in this direction, because that's not it. That's not where your child will thrive. So I have so many parents who, very much like me, got so angry when something got, rejected, because it's hard. It's
heartbreaking.
So heartbreaking, because you feel like, in a way, that they're rejecting you and you're rejecting my child, right? And so there's this feeling that, like, well, am I not good enough? Is my child not good enough? Why can't we come here? But it's got nothing to do about worth. It's really got to do with the fact that, like, we don't have what it takes to get your child to a point where they are thriving.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that reframe from parents that we really need to look at, so that we can pop these children into the right school, whatever that school will be.
Yeah.
But I love that, because I think it's so important that we are, as much as we can be, realistic in our wants and needs for our children. Because, to be honest, and I feel like I've done, bits and pieces of special needs and mainstream, I feel like everyone's trying their best, but no one's really getting it bang on. I have yet to see a school that is like, yes, we are a shining star and we've got it all going on and it's perfect, because every child is different and every child is going to learn differently. So how could you possibly cater to that many students, right, with such different learning, whether you're in mainstream or special needs? It's just such a difficult way to do. Did you want to add anything to the legal rights before we move on to the next question?
No, I think that.
Okay. So what should a parent do if we feel like we're not getting the right accommodations that are being met, right? You've got an IEP in place, you've got all these things set out, and you feel like that's not coming along. Maybe it's not fast enough, that in your mind that's not fast enough, or maybe you think that they're not actually doing what they said that they're going to do. How do you approach that?
Okay, so I think the one, well, there's many places where IEPs fall apart, but one of the central ones where it falls apart is the timeframes are not always set clearly. So IEPs are generally revisited in an SSG meeting, and you sit down and you look at them, and you might be as part of a behaviour thing as well. And you sit down and you look at them, and it's like, okay, we are going to put in place, I don't know, we're going to take them out twice a week for literacy support, whatever it might be. The school, but very often they don't say, when is this going to be looked at again? So If they do, what they write is at the next SSG. So if what they've said is we're going to look at this at the next SSG, if a parent tries to say something before the next SSG, they're going to be like, hang on, we've got a whole term to work on this. So that's the one thing to be aware of. Read the IEP. The second thing to be aware of is they've said something like, we are going to book your child in to see the psychologist, the school psychologist, to help with whatever. Here, sign the consent form. You sign the form, and then they say, okay, that should start in 2 weeks. I would say if in 3 weeks nothing started, you send an email, a very calm, non-threatening email that just says, just wanted to follow up. Jack hasn't come home and told me that he's seen anybody. Just wondering what happened with the form. And see what comes back. What might come back is, actually, yeah, the psychologist is off sick. Actually, yeah, the psychologist has gone on maternity leave and we haven't replaced her. Those are the kind of things. And then I think it's about saying, okay, depending on what it is that they're not following up on, that they're supposed to, is it something that's worth keeping going and keeping going and keeping following up and keeping following up? Or is it something you say, you know what, actually, I'm going to deal with this outside of school? Not all schools are good at everything. So I think it really depends what it is in terms of, now, if on the other hand, they've agreed to put in an age 3 mornings a week, and on those mornings, the kid's going to be in, class for the entire time. The aide's barely showing up. They haven't recruited anybody. And so your kid is spending the entire day pacing up and down the school playground. That's a problem. So I think I think sometimes, again, I'm not here to be on the side of the school. That's not what this is about. But I think sometimes what happens is one accommodation isn't met. One is being met, but not the way we want it to be met. And one, actually, they're doing their best and they're doing okay. But because none of them are perfect, it becomes like, but you're not doing all the things you agreed you were going to do. So I think what should you do first is go and almost make a list and a table, take that IEP, take a highlighter, and actually say, has this happened? If in your own head before you talk to school, has this happened? If so, when? If your child is older than about 7, they'll also tell you, particularly neurodivergent children. They remember details, a lot of them, with great accuracy. So if you say to them, Sarah was supposed to be coming and taking you out. When did you last see Sarah? And they're like, oh yeah, I last saw Sarah on Tuesday, September the 4th, before the holidays. And we talked about her new goldfish, right? And you're now sitting here in like November the 8th. You need to bring that up.
Yep, definitely.
Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you've had a conversation with the school where you're saying you're not following up and they're saying, yes, but we are, then setting up some sort of communication book or some sort of feedback system where it's like, okay, well, Jack's saying he hasn't seen Sarah since September the 2nd. You're saying he's seeing her every 2 weeks. Could you please send an email home or a notification on the app for every day he's sick? That's not a difficult thing to do.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think it's giving accountability, but in ways that are easy for the school. You've got to be really clear about, what are you checking on? Is it reasonable? And if they come back to you and say, yeah, sorry, the psychologist, to use that example, on maternity leave, we haven't replaced her yet, don't ask them again. Don't ask again. It means that is never getting followed up for you. So if that is a deal breaker for you and you want that in school, then what you need to say to them is, if I find my own one, can she come in? Or, fine, I've sourced a psychologist. I'm going to be picking up at 2:00 on a Tuesday because we're going to psychology.
Yeah, definitely. And then it comes back down to sometimes where parents are like, well, when the psychologist comes in at school, I'm assuming that's free versus going out to get a private psychologist, which you've got to pay for. And so there has to be at some point where, well, if you want the free part, then you have to wait. Then you have to be like, we've got to work together.
100%. 100%.
And by all means, go private and pay for it out of pocket. But know that this is part and parcel of where we're going. So don't get frustrated with the public system. So absolutely. And it is. But most of the time these conversations, Ariella, are so highly emotionally charged, right?
That's the problem as well.
You know, mums are coming in there and they're like, oh, I'm ready to battle. Like, let's go, right? I've got my armor on and I am ready to like rip you to shreds. But like as teachers, we're like, well, we're doing our best. And, you know, we may not have raised a neurodivergent child. We may not have as much training as you have because you've raised one. Like, so then, you know, we've got to cut them some slack. However, and again, I don't want to be on the school completely on the school side either. Because we want to make sure that they're getting their needs met, because too many neurodivergent children, specifically autistic kids, I see just fall through the cracks.
100%.
Minimally speaking and non-speaking kids, I see far too many children being babysat, if you will, like literally just laying on the floor and not getting the education that they deserve. And so there's got to be some sort of happy medium ground where teachers feel like they've got the education, the support. They've got to have that professional development piece to it so that they can do this. Because like we all know, once you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child.
One autistic child, correct.
Yeah. So if you've got 4 autistic kids in your class, plus another 20 odd typical kids, well, that's a lot. And that's a lot of trying to figure out what the best thing is for these 4 individual children, not to mention the other 20 kids that are there too. So that, in one aspect, we need to cut these teachers some slack, but at the same token, we don't want to not show up for our kids either. So it's both.
And I would also say to that, there are teachers who, from the beginning, it's not the right fit, right? And coming back to the legal rights, if it is more than a 1-form entry school, you do have the right to request a move to the other class.
What did you say 1 form? What do you mean?
So some schools per grade have more than 1 class. And it could be that your child is in 1 class, which you might have requested those particular other children to be in their class. But the teacher from day dot, you can see, does not get your child. In the meantime, your friend's kid who's also neurodivergent but is in another class, who the school probably split up on purpose because they didn't want to put them together, their teacher is making every accommodation, has a sensory box and has a corner in the corner of the room where they can go and read, and in high school gives them set library time or whatever it might be. You do have the right as a parent to say, look, I really just don't think this teacher is the right fit. Is there an option to switch to the other class?
And so what happens? Sorry.
They may not agree, but parents can ask.
And if there's not another class?
Then you're stuck. For the year, you're stuck.
Yep, totally.
You're stuck.
All right, so our now lucky last question is, what are some of the signs that your neurodivergent child, your autistic child is showing that maybe this isn't the right fit? This school isn't the right fit. What do you do then? Is there do we just keep going and be like, well, you know what? Life is hard and you've just got to harden up and just keep going? Or do we, because I've definitely seen parents do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Or do we go the extreme opposite way? And there's a lot of, coddling and just being like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. They're like, my child is my everything and he needs to get the best of the best. And we need to make sure that he has the red carpet. So what do we do if we feel like it's not the right fit?
Okay, so I think, again, because I want to move away, in this conversation, also from generalizing that whatever. So I think it depends what it is that's not the right fit and whether you can make your peace with it. So if what you're talking about is you have an unhappy child, then you've got to look at alternate options. What I don't like is unhappy children, neurodivergent or otherwise. Unhappy children, that doesn't go nice places, right? So that we want to avoid at all costs. But a child who is on the whole happy, on the whole, albeit socially maybe they're not doing brilliantly, maybe they're not the top of the charts for literacy and numeracy, whatever, they may not be achieving that, but as in, if your child, and again, I hope parents don't listen to, if your child is not gifted, right? If they're not up in the upper echelons, and but they're bright, but they're not super, and they are cruising at average, and they are happy, and they have 1 or 2 friends, that would be a sign to me that I would not be moving that child.
Absolutely.
But a parent in that situation might still be saying it's not the right fit because they can academically do better than they're doing. Why aren't they being encouraged to make more friends? Why aren't they being kicked out of the library at lunchtime so they can be on the soccer fields with the other boys, even though that's their time? So again, and that's not saying it's wrong, but my motto is always don't move a happy child.
Do you think we should be... Go ahead. No, go ahead.
A happy child is everything. And that any parent, I'm a parent, any parent will spend all the money in a world for a happy child.
You're spot on there, because there's, you know, a happy child will intrinsically be motivated to do the learning themselves. This is what I found time and time again, right? If your nervous system is comfortable, feels safe, you feel happy, you're more likely to do the things. And we're not all designed to be academic, Ariella. Like, we're not all, I can safely say, I'm not the biggest academic person. Give me a microphone and I'm good to go. Like, you know, and it's true, but like, I just think we don't need 1,000 friends. We don't all need to be getting 99.9% on our ATAR. We don't all need to be doctors and lawyers, right? Some of us are going to be garbage collectors and we're going to be living our best life, right? And I love that. I'm not here to be like, oh, well, this is where we should be. And that comes back down to, and I see this a lot in my coaching practice, where it's the parents' story, this idea around what we have created for our children and what we expect from our children, because this is, in my mind, you are going to be a lawyer or a doctor and you're getting average grades and we're going to push you so hard to possibly breaking point, right, to get you there, only to have a very unhappy, stressed out, overwhelmed mental and mindset issues, right? Just so we can get a title that you're probably not going to stick with anyway. You're probably going to leave it. You're probably going to drop out of the uni course anyway. How about we just, it all starts with the parents. This is, I see this time and time again. Like, if we can just look at the parents first, most of the things fall in place for the child, but we have to look at that part first. And sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's like, this is my grandfather was a doctor and my father was a doctor and I should be a doctor and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes that doesn't always work out, right? Whether your child is neurodivergent or not, we're not all going to be scholars. We're not all going to be in a position where we're going to be getting 99.9. And that's okay. That is more than okay, because we were all a bunch of 99.9 people. I tell you, this world would be very boring. We need the plumbers and we need the sparkies and the trades. And just like we need the engineers and everybody else in between, that's what makes this world beautiful. And if we can just change that reframe that a little bit, I think that life would be so much better. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. So on the set of what isn't the right fit, I think when you're hearing the same excuses from the school again and again, or every meeting is a different excuse, or every week they're writing to you to complain about. So one week they're complaining about your kid was disruptive in the classroom. The next week it's your kid doesn't want to go and do the big school assembly because they say there's too many people in the room. If they are complaining about your child on an ongoing basis, that's where I would be concerned.
When you say who you're saying is complaining in this situation?
That could be the teacher, that could be the secretary that's emailing you to say, oh, they've been in my office all day again today, that sort of thing. And if you're starting to see school refusal.
Definitely. The school can't is definitely a big one.
School can't.
Yeah, it just shows so much around what's going on for the child.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
So our website is www.kidsontrackconsultancy.com. We're on Instagram, on Facebook. Reach out. We're happy to help.
Love that so much, because there's such a need for an organization like yourself, because most parents don't really know what they're doing. They don't know the laws and they don't know how to advocate properly because they don't know the questions to ask. And this is where it gets really confusing and very overwhelming. So having a space for someone to come in and be able to ask the difficult questions, but to even know what the difficult questions are to ask is brilliant. All right. And even if, and I'm saying this to all the listeners listening, sometimes you need to be able to just pick up the phone and have a consult with Ariella and be like, hey, this is the situation. I just need a sounding board. I need someone to bounce ideas off to see if this is the right direction that I'm going in, or am I completely off left center and I don't know that this is not where I should be. Sometimes it's really good, as much as we don't want to hear it, it's good to have a reality check. It's really good to be able to go, this is what we can ask for and this is what we can't ask for, because they don't have the capabilities. So that's awesome. All right. Time for rapid fire questions. Don't get scared because it's nothing too exciting. Well, it's exciting, but it's nothing too controversial. What's one thing you wish every teacher understood about neurodivergent learners?
Every child is different and they're not trying to disrupt.
Yes. Oh my Lord. Yes. Yes. What's been the most surprising lesson you've learned through school advocacy?
Some people get it and some people don't.
It's
you
true.
Can't teach it. You can't teach it.
No, you can't. And I think, and that goes back down to like having the experience, the ability to raise a neurodivergent child, to raise an autistic child. In some ways, it's such a blessing because you can see it from such a different lens versus a person, an adult who hasn't. You get gifted all of these lessons. They have no idea. And sometimes people do get it, where I've seen teachers walk in, be able to scan a room and know how to read that room in 5 seconds flat. And I've had teachers go into other rooms and be like, why is Billy being such a pain in the bottom? Like, why is he not focused and this and that? I'm like, mate, that's not it. Like, we need to look at it differently. But yeah, and you can't teach it because I think it's innate.
Can't teach it.
No.
You get it or you don't.
Yeah, that's right. When it comes to school, what's your non-negotiable for autistic learners? Kicked you for 6 on that one.
I'm trying to think how to word it. They need to be accepted and loved for the human beings that they are.
Say it again for the people in the back. Oh, yes, it does. It's so true. They're not broken. For the love of God, they're not broken.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with these children.
Yeah.
They just need to be loved and exactly how they are. What's one myth about autism and education that you wish you could erase forever?
So many. So many. Every child with I'll give you 3. Every child with autism needs to move.
As in like movement during the class?
They can't sit still.
Yep.
Non-verbal equals not bright or low speaking, as you put it before. And will never be able to socialize or adapt to mainstream.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that idea that your child is non-speaking, so they mustn't be very smart, right?
Yeah.
And I have seen that time and time again, and I'm just like, I just want to shake these people. I'm like, that is not it.
It's that devastates me.
What advice do you give parents on the days that they feel like that when they feel like they want to give up?
You are enough.
You should have that on a recording for parents to listen to all the time. Yeah, because
you're your child's safe space. You're their safe space. If you're doing enough to be that, you are enough.
And it's because it's true, right? But we need to pour into ourselves, right? If we're not filling our cup, and I'm not talking like we're going to go off to the Bahamas for like 4 weeks and sit on the beach and drink, cocktails. I'm like, maybe you just need to go to an aerobics class, or maybe you need to catch up with your girlfriends every fortnight or every 3 weeks, or whatever that looks like. But make sure that you're scheduling. And when I say scheduling, I literally mean you need to schedule that into your diary. You put it in like you're putting in a speech appointment.
Yes.
And that's how important it is. So I love that so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Ariella.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. It's been such a good episode, and it's been so juicy with so many great ideas and great tips that parents can take away so that they can go on and be like, okay, this is what's going on and this is what I can do for my child. So thank you again. And just remind people where they can find you again.
www.kidsontrackconsultancy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, and I will talk to you soon. See you later.